Hello everyone, this is Professor Hill. This is a short video for our class Ethics, Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College, spring of 2018. And look, it's Wednesday, February the 21st, 2018. We're in week 6, looking at chapter 6 of our textbook, Doing Ethics by Vaughn. And there's a lot of different concepts that we want to unpack on our way to learning about this side of the equation. We first started talking about consequentialism. Now we're talking about non-consequentialism. The consequentialism was about trying to decide what's right or wrong, good or bad, based on the outcomes or the consequences, and then using those, backing up from them to decide what's right or wrong. Here, we're now on the other side of the fence. We're talking about rules and principles that apply to everybody, kind of an objectivist approach, which says that, there's certain situations where you might know what the outcomes are, and you might like them or not like them, but it doesn't matter. You can't use them in order to determine what's the right thing to do, because that's determined by rules, by principles that we learn about and then apply. And he's got a lot to say about that in this chapter, not least of which, like I said yesterday, this is where our author comes down. He likes this. He likes non-consequentialist moral theories. He thinks Kant's got the right idea. He thinks natural law makes a lot of sense. And those are the two big, natural law and Immanuel Kant, those are the two big moral theories that he's looking at here in chapter 6. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to focus on a couple of different aspects of this throughout the course of the week. And today we want to talk about this concept called the Doctrine of Double Effect. And let me read you the definition straight out of the book and then talk about the case study he uses, which, by the way, is a case study that we started with, which was the Jenny Lake case. Now he's got this built in here into chapter 6, and we want to talk about it. But again, right out of the textbook here, he says, the Doctrine of Double Effect, the principle that performing a good action may be permissible even if it has bad effects. But performing a bad action for the purpose of achieving good effects is never permissible. Any bad effects must be unintended. So again, you can do something good even if it has bad effects. As long as you're not intending those bad effects, you're focused on the good you're trying to do, and that's the permissible. It's permissible under this kind of double effect. It might have good and bad effects, and as long as you're intending the good, the bad is okay. It's still bad, but it's going to be permissible under this doctrine. Now, this is exactly the setup for, and he talks about it in the chapter, the Jenny Lake case, which was that this was a 17-year-old, very young girl who finds out she has cancer. She starts going through chemotherapy and radiation treatment. And that treatment is designed to help her get better, to cure her cancer. But it turns out she becomes pregnant during the course of this treatment. And now she's faced with this very difficult choice that we talked about, which was, do I continue my treatment knowing it'll terminate the pregnancy? Or do I stop my life-saving treatment and allow the pregnancy to continue to grow and develop and be thinking about the unborn baby who will be born? The trade-off there. And of course, what she did was she stopped her chemotherapy. She stopped her radiation treatment, and she was able to give birth to a young, healthy son, Chad Michael, and she died 12 days later because she had been off of her treatment for months and months, allowing the pregnancy to continue. And that was obviously a difficult situation. Like I said at the beginning, it just was going to have no happy ending. It was just always going to be bad. And so we talked about how do we analyze this from a perspective where we're trying to make moral judgments. Now, I intentionally did that case first. And we looked at it from this kind of consequentialist outcomes point of view, where a lot of people are saying, well, it made sense to be trying to judge what's the right decision to make based upon the outcome, because it was pretty stark. It was either going to be Jenny Lake lives or the baby lives. What's it going to be? Now, this is even assuming that, built into that was the assumption that it's a one-for-one life. Even though she was early in her pregnancy, that's a conversation for another day about, does life begin at conception, at some point further down the road? Is it heartbeat? Is it a certain amount of weeks? Is it brain development? Is it viability? We're going to have that conversation another day. But let's, for the sake of this argument, just assume that was a one-for-one trade-off in terms of the life of the mother, the life of the child. Even though, again, like I said, in that particular case, she was early on. Now, here's the thing. And again, I want to come back to this because I want to be fair to the author. I know I've been hard on Louis Vaughn. But he says, he lays out specifically 4 criteria in order to make this decision. Number 1, the action is inherently either morally good or morally neutral. That is, the action itself must at least be morally permissible. And in the case study that he presents us, which is this case study, the chemotherapy and the pregnant woman, he says, well, yes, this meets condition number 1 because chemotherapy is just it's a medical treatment. It's morally either neutral or positive. There's nothing inherently wrong, according to him, with chemotherapy or radiation treatment. We'll come back to that. Number 2, the bad effect is not used to produce the good effect. So it's not like, the chemotherapy is going to somehow terminate the pregnancy, and that has the effect of saving the mother's life. He's saying you can't do this if just it was the killing of this unborn baby that saved the mother's life. That would be a morally negative action, and you can't use that even if it saved the life of the mother. In fact, he's very clear about that. So he says here, the killing a fetus to save the mother's life is never permissible. However, using a drug to cure the mother's life-threatening disease, even though the fetus dies as a side effect of the treatment, may be permissible. So again, that's because the action that's driving this, which is do you continue the chemotherapy or not, he's saying is morally permissible. Now the third thing is, he says the intention must always be to bring about the good effect, because we're going to have good and bad effects. He's saying the intention matters. For any given action, the bad effect may occur, and it may even be foreseen, but it must not be intended. So now we're back to the intention of the decision maker, and as long as their intentions are pure, then the action is going to be okay. Got to come back to that one too in a minute. And so number 4, the good effect must be at least as important as the bad effect. And what he says here is the good of an action must be proportional to the bad. If the bad heavily outweighs the good, the action is not permissible. And again, I just want to use his words here because I'm going to challenge them in a second. He says the good of saving your own life in an act of self-defense, for example, must be at least as great as the bad of taking the life of your attacker. And in the case study he uses on the next page, when he's talking about the mother and the decision whether or not to continue the treatment, he says, is the good effect proportional to the bad? In this case, a life is balanced against a life. The life of the woman and the life of the fetus. From the natural law perspective, both sides of the scale seem about equal in importance. If the good effect to be achieved for the woman was, say, a nicer appearance through cosmetic surgery, and the bad effect was the death of the fetus, the two sides would not have the same level of importance. But in this case, the action does meet condition number 4, because the action meets all 4 conditions. Receiving the chemotherapy is morally permissible for the woman. Yeah, look, there's just a whole lot of problems with this. I get the appeal, but wow. First of all, we're talking about a moral theory where we're trying to figure out whether it's permissible or not to do. And we kind of start off with number one, it's morally permissible. And I'm like, whoa, 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 now hold on. That sounded a little circular to me, but what he says is, no, don't forget, we're starting with the fact that with the judgment that the chemotherapy in this circumstances is morally good or neutral. It's not bad. And so, and I get what he's saying. It's a medical treatment, and I agree with him. But it kind of starts off on this foot that we're going to show that this is good by saying that it's good. And he said, well, then no. It's about this thing which is at least morally neutral. It's just a treatment. In this situation, is it good? In other normal situations where the person's not pregnant, yeah, it's good because it's going to have this good outcome. I'm like, oh, no, hold on a minute. Sounds to me like we're already back at consequentialism. And that's the problem we get into right away, which is that, first of all, the intention piece, is it your intention to have the treatment for the cancer, even though it might have this bad side effect? Well, listen, I hate to say this whole thing about your intentions, for lots of people with difficult moral dilemmas that they're facing, difficult moral challenges, you're going to have lots of different, sometimes conflicting, sometimes overlapping, sometimes reinforcing intentions. You might have 6 or 7 or 8 reasons for doing something. In fact, what you're going to find is a lot of times some of those are consequentialist and some of those are non-consequentialist. My point is that there's lots of situations where our intentions matter, yes, but can we, because we're talking about personal intentions, can we just flip those around? I mean, let's say that she's like Jenny Lake. She was getting the chemotherapy, the radiation. She finds out she's pregnant. It sounds like now it makes a big difference whether her reaction is, oh, yes, I've always wanted to be a mom, or, oh, my God, no, I can't be pregnant now. I'm in high school. And that suddenly her reaction is now going to determine whether we can use this moral principle. And it sounds like, well, with girl A, who says, oh, I've always wanted to have a baby, this is going to be morally permissible because her intention trumps the bad effect. But if there's another girl who says, oh, my God, I'm in high school, I can't get pregnant right now, that it'll be a different outcome for that person. In that case, the same course of action would not be morally permissible. That, I think, is a problem. But look, we're just getting started. Because here's the other thing, the proportionality. He lays that in there like it's not somehow a relativistic decision. Like somehow we're not back at the trolley problem. And this is what I mean by that, which is he's saying, look, in this case, you have to weigh and balance the life of the mother and the life of the fetus. And I'm like, okay, which is exactly the case we had with Jenny Lake. And so if Jenny Lake made the decision to continue her treatment, it would be morally permissible even if the fetus died because of this proportionality, this weighing and balancing of the outcome. And now I'm thinking, well, what about the girl in the next bed? She's pregnant with twins. What about the next one who's pregnant with triplets? Is it then not permissible? What about quadruplets? What about, let's go all the way up to, hey, the 5 guys standing on the railroad tracks, and so we're back now, or it seems like all of a sudden in the middle of this non-consequentialist principle, this doctrine of double effect, suddenly we're injecting these consequentialist kind of factors. We're talking about, he kind of almost, of course, puts these proportionality factors in there as one of the conditions of the 4 for this. Now, I got to tell you, I think that there are all kinds of challenges to this principle. It has an appeal it kind of makes sense. But some people treat it like, aha, I've got a loophole I can use to go down the course of action that I want, and I'll still be morally permissible because of this. I've got these angels dancing on the head of a pin, and I'm ignoring all these other factors out there. I Here's my thing about it, which is I don't even mind the analysis. I think it would be helpful to somebody trying to make a difficult decision. But I think part of what disturbs me about it is he kind of approaches this as if this is an absolute given, rock solid doctrine of double effect principle, which is really quite good and which should be applied and can be easily be applied. And you just, it's like ABC, apply it to your problem and it spits out the correct answer, and that therefore X, Y, and Z is morally permissible. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. It's just far more complicated than that. And when you say you have to look at the specifics, you have to look at the details, you have to look at the circumstances, that is back on the other side of our balancing act about what are the relevant relative factors that we're including, not just that we're laying down a principle. And we saw this in our first conversation about Jenny Lake, which was that if you said, for example, well, no, there is a principle that applies, and that is that parents sacrifice for their children. And Jenny Lake did the right thing because you know what she did? She sacrificed her life for her unborn child. And we do that because we're willing to make even the ultimate sacrifice, to give up our own lives to protect our children. That's the principle we need to apply to this case. And when somebody says that, I say, great. And does that apply to Jenny? Or does that apply to Jenny's mom? Because you got to remember, most people are thinking that, well, I'm applying it to Jenny. She's the one that's got to make this decision about chemotherapy or the baby. And I'm like, yeah, she's also 17 years old. She's a minor. This is the decision of her parents, her mom. If this rule applies to Jenny's mom, you get the opposite result. Jenny's mom steps in and go, hey, honey, listen, I know you're upset. I know you're thinking about the baby, but you need to keep taking this life-saving chemotherapy because my job is to worry about you, my child. I'm going to sacrifice for you. And the difficulty is, whether you like it or not, I have the decision-making authority. You're a minor. It's my choice. And I'm going to force this on you to save your life. That seems to me like the application of that rule. The parents do everything to save their child. And so again, like I said, it's complicated. These things aren't easy. It's not like there's a simple set of rules out there that you can easily apply. And if somebody's telling you the opposite of that, somebody's saying it's clear and simple and easy, just find the rules and apply them, I think they're doing you a disservice. So look, this is the concept we're talking about in the book, the Doctrine of Double Effect. He lays it out, pages 109, 110. He goes right to the example we've been talking about. And I want you to rethink that. Rethink the Jenny Lake case. And then think, well, how does that even apply to the case study at hand coming up on Sunday? Well, look, that's the Doctrine of Double Effect out of Chapter 6. I'll come back tomorrow and do a little more on some other aspects of the chapter. In the meantime, wrestle with these things. Read Chapter 6. Think about how they apply to the case studies we're talking about. It's not easy. Take care. Bye-bye.